The southern United States are famous for many things. The ladies, the sweet tea, the porches everyone seems to sit on, the accents, the multitude of churches that can be found on every corner, and quite possibly it is famous for the fact that it seems to be dying, or more appropriately, decaying. Larry J. Griffin and Ashley B. Thompson examined this idea in their essay Enough About the Disappearing South. Profound transformations in the South since the 1960s have led many observers to sound the region's death knell. Distinctive and exceptional no longer, they say, the region has been disappearing, vanishing, shrinking, and converging with mainstream America for decades, a victim of relentless incorporation into mass society. For years it has been claimed that the South is dying out, and that it is losing the distinct culture that once made it so uniquely the South. It can be seen all over, but is particularly evident in areas where the urban and the rural meet, the small towns that make up the bulk of the South. Here are where the changes are easily discernible, and the slow decay that seems to be taking hold takes on a physically manifested form. There are multiple factors that could share the blame for how the modern South is, and my goal is to examine these factors and see how they affected small towns in the South, particularly the town where I live, BarnWell, South Carolina. Many areas of the South were settled in the mid-1700s to early 1800s. Some areas of the South were not officially chartered until after the Revolutionary War, but those that were settled were small towns that generally consisted of a few families surrounded by plantations and farmland. As a result of the following Industrial Revolution, the demand for products such as cotton rose, but the transportations of goods was still inefficient. Transport often meant carrying a load by wagon to a river, where it was sent down the river by a boat, and then put back on a wagon to be taken to its final destination. This was a costly process and couldn't service the high demand for goods. As a result, railroad transport was introduced. Many individuals were skeptical of the trains that were said to go so fast they could cause a man riding them to drop dead. However, they proved to be the most efficient method of transport at the time. One of the first places to have a railroad system was South Carolina. The South Carolina Railroad was chartered in 1827 and completed in 1833. It ran 136 miles from Charleston to Hamburg, a town near the Savannah River. When the South seceded from the Union, the cost of losing proved terrifyingly high. General Sherman's march through the South left many places in ruin. Some places survived by either miracle or divine intervention. The Church of the Holy Apostles in BarnWell, South Carolina, for example, still stands to this day when all around it was burned to the ground. It was used to house the horses of General Kilpatrick of the Union Army, which were also watered from the church's fount. The St. Andrew's Catholic Church, the first Catholic church in South Carolina, was also spared Sherman's wrath. The BarnWell Presbyterian Church also survived and was used as a temporary courthouse after the Civil War, and now stands as a performing arts center. Call it gumption, call it stubbornness, but Southerners rebuilt and stayed angry long after Reconstruction ended. Legend says you can still find men and women down here who wave the rebel flag in the name of a secession they weren't alive to witness. Interestingly enough, the changes that took place after the Civil War resulted in more individuals flocking to towns and cities to rebuild. Thus, growing populations of people began to pop up all over Southern maps. This shift resulted in the creation of wood mills and shanty towns to support the new demand for jobs. As time went by, the wars took effect. Forts were set up all over the South to protect the coast and house prisoners of war. A relic of the Second World War stands in disrepair today in BarnWell. German prisoners of war were taken and, as rumor has it, made to pick and shell pecans while guards watched from this small police station. Large corporations then began looking at the South as a source of workers. Clothing corporations like Ameritron made their home in BarnWell, South Carolina. The Cold War brought the Savannah River site to BarnWell as well, and the area where it was to be built was cleared out by federal government and remains government property to this day. It is from here that things seem to take a turn for the worse for poor BarnWell and other Middle America areas. Large corporations moved out, seeking cheaper workforces or different governing bodies. This left areas to become economic wastelands. For some areas, that meant a loss of population, as individuals who carried the identity of their areas left to find work. This and other factors, such as the influx of foreign individuals, or northerners as I've heard people say, has resulted in southerners feeling something akin to a loss of identity. This, combined with the economic drop-off, has resulted in what could be called a decay of both the literal and figurative South. For as many structures remain standing, there are many that go to ruin. And areas where there are lack of jobs has thrown individuals at the edge or under the poverty line. Is this the death, then, that has been so predicted for the South? I have to say, personally, that I doubt it. Companies like Boeing and Savannah River still stay in the South, and populations continue to grow in South Carolina by the year. And in South Carolina alone, there are more than 60 colleges, not counting regional locations, with thousands of students attending from across the country and overseas. The South is decaying, that there is no question about. But it is a decay in a cyclical type process wherein change takes place. It is my belief that even as the South decays and even as it nears death, it will come back. Maybe not the same, but probably a mixture of ideas both old and new. If there's anything that can be learned from history, it's that places like the South, where the rough and the beautiful, the rural and the urban meet, always survive in some form or another.